Now that we have covered the concepts of the phoneme and the allophone in some detail, let's ask this question. Are phonemes the same across all languages? And do they always have the same allophones? The short answer is no, but let's explore how we arrive at this answer. Let's consider the English sounds d and the. Are they different phonemes or allophones of the same phoneme? Let's start by looking at whether they occur in overlapping or non-overlapping environments. The best way to do so is to see if English has any minimal pairs involving d and the. It turns out that we do. The verb breathe and the verb breed have the exact same number of the exact same sounds in the exact same sequence, except for the last sound of the word. The use of the versus d distinguishes between two words: breathe, inhale and exhale, and breed, procreate or cause to procreate. We also have other minimal pairs with these sounds. The pair lather and ladder distinguishes these sounds in the word median position. We could potentially find more minimal pairs, but even one is enough to conclude that English indeed has minimal pairs distinguished only by the sounds d and the. Because the sounds occur in the same phonetic environment, that is, can be surrounded by the same sounds, but the resulting words are different in meaning, we conclude that the sounds d and the are in contrastive distribution. Remember, contrastive means that we perceive and use them as distinct sounds, not versions of the same sound. Therefore, d and the are separate phonemes in the mind of an English speaker. Note that when we write about sounds as they are produced, we put them in square brackets, but when we write about them as phonemes, we put them between slashes. Now let's look at the same sounds as they're used in Spanish. My apologies in advance to any native Spanish speaker for my far from perfect pronunciation. The sound d is produced in most Spanish varieties in words like dama, donde, and toldo. The sound the appears in phrases like adonde, todo, and la dama. Notice that we did not change the meaning of some of the words themselves, we just changed the phonetic environment in which they occur. For the words donde and dama, we added prepositions, and in one case, an article in front. We did change the word toldo to todo, but in this case, the change was achieved by removing one sound completely. These are not minimal pairs because the pairs, even if we could call them that, do not have the target sounds d and th in identical phonetic environments. If we look carefully, in other words, if we do a thorough phonological analysis of the data we have, we will see that the sound the appears between vowels, and the sound d appears at the beginning of words, or after consonants or before consonants, but never between vowels. This means that d and the are in complementary distribution. They're perceived by most Spanish speakers as slightly different versions of the sound d. We can thus draw the conclusion that d and the are allophones of the same phoneme. So it appears that in English the sounds d and the are separate phonemes, and in Spanish, allophones of the same phoneme d. This means that what counts as distinct phonemes or as allophones of the same phoneme varies from language to language. Specific sounds can be perceived as phonemes by speakers of one language, but as allophones of the same phoneme by speakers of another. It is extremely important to remember that the actual articulatory factors, or more precisely their similarity or difference between the two sounds, does not affect whether the sounds are distinct phonemes or allophones of the same phoneme. D and the are pronounced essentially the same no matter what the language is. They are both voiced and dental or alveolar, depending on the language. So the tongue is going to approach and touch the teeth, or the space just above them. But D is a plosive and th is a fricative. Yet for an English speaker, there are two different sounds capable of distinguishing between words like they and they. But for a Spanish speaker, there are just two different ways to say the D sound, with a plosive form occurring everywhere except between vowels, where the is articulated. Most native Spanish speakers, unless they're students of linguistics, are not even aware that this variation exists until they hear a learner of Spanish as a foreign language pronounce words like todo or adonde with a foreign accent. Only the mental representation and distribution of sounds matters for determining whether they're phonemes or allophones. The phonemic and allophonic status is determined through linguistic analysis. Now, let's summarize what we've learned in this lecture. First, a phoneme is a mental representation of a sound that speakers of a particular language have. In each language, speakers perceive phonemes as distinct from one another and contrastive. In other words, contributing to distinguishing meanings between words. Allophones, on the other hand, are sounds we actually produce when we speak. They are variations of a phoneme. How we actually articulate phonemes varies depending on the environment in which the phoneme occurs, and these variations are called allophones. The environments in which allophones occur are complementary. Each one adds up to others to constitute what we perceive as a whole phoneme. But what counts as a phoneme versus an allophone is not universal, but rather language-specific. What the speakers of language A hear as two separate phonemes can be heard as allophones of the same phoneme by the speakers of language B. And this concludes our lecture on phonemes and allophones. In the next supplementary video, we will go through the sample process of analyzing linguistic data to determine whether two sounds in a particular language count as phonemes or allophones.